We are going to try something together today. I am going to oven can flour, dry flour. Right now, we are on the tail end of our stay-at-home orders. Depending on when you're looking at this, this would be 2020, April of 2020. And when this all started, I usually have flour on hand, and I do make bread. I don't make bread all the time, but I do on occasion. When this whole thing started and people started making a run, well, first of all, it was the toilet paper. Don't even get me started on toilet paper. The food in general. We weren't able to find flour. Now, my first grocery store run, I got 2 bags of flour, and they had plenty, and I wasn't really thinking they were gonna be out of flour, and I bought it. And because we couldn't get bread, I was making a whole bunch of bread, and I was sharing with our friends and family, and then the flour was gone too. The flour was gone, sugar was gone, everything was gone. Couldn't find it anywhere. So I went with my mom and Randy, my stepdad, and we were gonna be on a mission before we were ordered to stay home. You go out only for essentials, and we were gonna find flour and all the essentials we needed to bulk up on our flour resources and be able to make bread and do all the things that we like to do at home. So we went to a restaurant supply store, and I ended up with 50 pounds of flour. You don't really want 50 pounds of flour. Anyway, when you can't find flour, you take what you can get. Generally, you can freeze flour, and I do that if I'm just getting a bag at the time. And I will freeze them in a Ziploc bag, and I'll stack them in the freezer. And that works fine if you have freezer space, but in our kitchen, we have a side-by-side, which doesn't have a lot of space. And I use that for our everyday rotation, breakfast, vegetables, different things like that. Then we do have an upright freezer in the laundry room. That is mainly for our meat supply. Our venison and our elk is in there. And depending on the time of year, that can be full and there's not room for my things. Now, I did pack away some of it in the freezer, and I decided I had to figure out what to do. I can't use up my freezer space for the flour. And I researched, and I'd heard about it, but oven canning your dry goods. Now, I did some research, and before you do it, I would suggest you do your own research. You're going to do it with me because I've not done it before, so we're going to do it together. See how that goes. Now, I've heard of that before. My stepmom has told me about it. My grandmother had dry canned goods. I never really had done any of it myself. Now, we discovered this isn't really the flour that we would prefer to have. It is a restaurant grade flour, but it is unbleached, which is what I wanted, but it does have some things added in I wouldn't have preferred to have in my flour on a normal basis. At this point, I would prefer not to dump all of this flour. I'm trying to give it away. In case we go through this again, I do want to be prepared. So it isn't my ideal flour, but it's usable. I can make breads, I can make muffins, anything I can use flour for. You can use this particular bread from the restaurant supply store. I have 4 half-gallon mason jars, and I wash them thoroughly and I dry them in the oven, because we want to start with dry. Everything needs to be dry. Dry canning jars, dry flour, and a dry measuring cup. And I'm going to use a funnel, and that will save on the mess. Flour storage can be tricky if you're storing flour for a long period of time. And let me show you in the cabinet. I store flour in my tiny little pantry in these Rubbermaid containers, and I label the front so I have all-purpose bread, whole wheat, in there so I can just slide it out. And generally a 5-pound bag, a bag that you buy at the store, is gonna fit in here perfectly. I go through seasons, if you would say, of making a ton of stuff. I'm always baking or cooking with the flour. I'm not always making bread. I go through seasons of making bread. And now I'm back in a season where I am making a lot of bread because we can't find it. And at my house, basically 1 loaf is lunch. So we're making more than 1 loaf at a time. And you do run through the flour if you do that. But I'm using whole wheat. I'm mixing my whole wheat in this because it's a little, you know, you're going to get the better texture mixing the whole wheat. And I want that flavor of the whole wheat as well. So I'm not making full-on white bread. So that's how I store it in my pantry. If you're storing it longer, you might end up with bugs. I've had bugs in cornmeal and flour and everything. I've had bugs. Now, your bugs can come from the factory, and it doesn't matter where the factory is. You could have eggs, mealyworm eggs in here. You could have that no matter what. It doesn't matter where it comes from. You're going to have that. And that is allowed by FDA standards. So if I'm going to want to store this for a long period of time, I want to try to kill any larval eggs or anything that's in there. Now, what I did learn is that if you freeze it, well, freezing it will kill them. So my extra, I do have some in the freezer. And you could freeze, then dry can if you wanted to be extra careful. What I read is that the dry canning is going to kill any larval eggs as well. So my cans are warm. I put them in the oven. My cans are warm. We're going to fill the jars, and then we're going to put them in a 200-degree oven for 1 hour with the lid off and see what happens. So the first thing we're going to do is fill the jars. So now that I've yacked your ear off, we're going to fill the jars. And I don't have that big of a scoop, but I think I would make a mess otherwise. Now, long-term storage, we live in Florida. We do not have a basement where I can store things in a cool, dry place. We live in a hot, humid climate. So long-term storage for us is a little tricky. We do have an outbuilding that's built partially into the ground, and I store a lot of our memorabilia in there. We're going to want to tamp this down. Okay, so we want to tamp it down. Now, we live in an old 1960s house, and they didn't believe in closets at that time. So we do not have a lot of closet space for sure. My pantry, we'll do a pantry tour. I've got food all over the house because I don't really have a lot of storage for it. And if you store food, which I do store food, but the people in my house eat a lot of food. So it gets rotated pretty often. Now, it's my understanding we want to fill this pretty high. You know, if you're water bath canning or pressure canning, the rule is like a quarter. But I've heard you want to do this pretty full. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. Now we want to wipe the top of the jar. We want to make sure we do not have any flour on here when we go to put that in the oven. To go put my apron on because this is quite the mess. So I have 2 jars done. I'm doing 4 jars. To me, that's enough storage that I can handle. And you know, what I was reading is you can dry can rice, beans, oatmeal, cornmeal. I tend to have a problem with bugs in cornmeal, I'll just be honest. And so I keep that in the freezer most of the time. And you don't have to be doing this because of a shortage or a pandemic. If you've got some flour or there was a good sale, and you know, sometimes depending on the market or what kind of flour you're buying, it can be expensive. You could use this as a method of, you know, maybe you're going to use it within 6 months, but you don't really have the storage space in your cabinet or your freezer. This would be a way to do that. So I have been putting cornmeal in a Ziploc bag, which works. If I had more than this, I would put it in the freezer, or I might just go ahead and dry can it, because I think I'm really gonna like that idea, because I can put these in a lot of different places. Our schoolroom, well, we do a lot of things in the schoolroom. It's my office, it's our schoolroom, and it's our guest room and storage room all in one, and pantry. So I'll probably put them in the closet in there. And oatmeal, I think, is a great idea too. Oatmeal, you know, when it goes on sale, I'll buy a bunch, and sometimes I try to get it in the big canisters. Sometimes I might be getting the steel cut. I always buy the old-fashioned. Just depends where I'm getting it and if I'm getting some on sale. We go through it quite often, so having that to be able to keep in the jars would be good too. All right, so now we've got 3. We've got 1 more, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with them in the oven. Okay, I got all 4 of the jars filled. And I will tell you that when I went back and I tamped all 4 down, put your hand over it, because I have flour everywhere. When I tamped them all down, I could get another cup in there. So the tamping down is pretty important. Now I am wiping the rim. We don't want any flour on the rim or in where it's going to seal. We want to make sure that that's clean. We'll do it again when we take it out of the oven, just to be sure. We don't want anything to prevent the seal. You also want to inspect your jars, even if they're brand new jars. These were brand new because I only had 2 of my own, because I use them for iced tea. I don't do big things of canning like this. You want to check your jars, make sure there are no cracks, no holes or anything like that in your jars, just like if you were going to water bath can or pressure can. That's really important, because that might crack in the oven or over time, and you definitely do not want to come to a closet that's covered in flour. That would not be good. And I have had cracking happen in water bath before, which is fine because I've caught it ahead of time. But if this is in your closet or your pantry, that wouldn't be good if something happened. Now I have all 4 jars ready to go, and I think I'm going to put them on a cookie sheet just to be safe for the wobble aspect of it. I did have to remove one of the grates in my oven and bring the last one down for them to fit in my oven. I'm not sure if I have a small oven, but these are pretty tall in order for them to fit. So we're going to go and put them in a 200-degree oven for 1 hour with the lids off, and we will come back and then put the lids on and let them seal. As far as flour goes, unless you are making a lot of bread or cooking a lot, I don't recommend getting a 50-pound bag unless you're going to share it with someone. Now, in the early years, when I made a lot of bread when the boys were young, my neighbor and I actually would purchase a 50-pound bag. We would split it between us, bag them up in Ziploc bags like this, and keep it in the freezer. And we were making bread a lot. You know, we were young moms and had lots of energy. Anyway, I love to make bread, but not like we were making it back then. And we would buy really good quality. You know, we could go through a loaf a day around here. So I do supplement with store-bought bread because I don't want to be making bread all day long. Anyway, so that's my take on the pandemic 50 pounds of flour and what you do with it. I will most likely try to give the rest of this away. I don't want to throw it away. It's valuable, but I don't have anywhere to put it. So I've gotten what I can, and the stores are sort of catching up a little bit, but I have plenty to make bread for the next several months if necessary. So I just have nowhere to put this in this tiny little house. So today I'm hoping to get rid of this, and maybe I can share that information, the oven canning, with someone else, and that they are able to do that. All right, let's see what they look like. Okay, our hour is up, and we're going to get them out and put the lids on. Our hour is up, and I am going to get the jars out of the oven, and we're going to start with this one. So I'm going to take the lid, place it on. Oh, I want to make sure there's nothing here. No, nothing on the lid. And then I'm going to take and put the ring on. And it said you needed to do it really kind of jar tight. And I'm going to set it over here, and then we'll get the other ones out. All three of them are out, 4 of them. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to place the lid and then the ring. It's hot. Really tighten it down. Lid. Make sure there's nothing on it. Lid. Ring. And really tighten it down. They say for whatever reason to do it on a dish rag or something where your hot jar isn't sitting on a cold, I have ceramic tile up here. We don't want that. So that's why I've got them on a rag. And the last one, okay, now we are going to let these sit because supposedly the heat as it cools is going to vacuum seal our jars. And you know when you're canning, regular canning, water canning, you hear the pop, 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 pop. We should hear that with these. And I don't know how long it takes. I guess I'll just stare at them. I'll go fix dinner. So this is my attempt at dry oven canning flour. Again, we could do rice, beans, oatmeal, cornmeal, anything dry. Again, do your own research before you attempt this. I did quite a bit and I feel secure with it. Again, this is my leftover quarantine flour that I don't really want to use, probably unless I have to, but this is nice to know that I have it in case we have a shortage of things later on. I've got this in the back of the pantry in the schoolroom, and we're ready to go. So if you have some extra flour or any of these other dry products we're talking about, go ahead and give your hand at dry canning. We could have used smaller jars, but I had so much flour we might as well do the half gallon. And I can always use these for drinks and lemonade and things later on, so they're useful to have around. So try your hand at it. Let me know how it goes. If you have different advice, let us know. so we can change things up, and I'll let you know if they pop.